34 years ago, Jane and I almost were involved in an international incident. We were in Venice, and we like to go to Jewish cemeteries because you can learn a lot about going to Jewish cemeteries. So in Venice, you don't get buried. Jews have a cemetery in Lido, which is one of the islands off of Venice. So we took a boat there, and we got off. It was a real rainy day, and we really wanted to get into the Venice cemetery, the Jewish cemetery, because there were interested people buried there. And this was way, 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 way before there was so much security about all Jewish institutions in Europe. But for some reason, there was a security guard. And I think what happened was, if I remember, I said to Jane, take the camera, run in, take a picture, and run out. I'm such a brave gentleman, aren't I? And I believe, I'm getting confused, but I believe she did so, but there were police there who were then coming after us. Now, I wanted to tell the story that I went in and got it, but I don't think that's the case. I think Jane was the brave one, or recent rewriting Londi Jewish history. That's how we're going to tell it. The Lido Cemetery is fascinating, and you can go to all kinds of different Jewish cemeteries in the world and learn a lot about them. I was in Germany and visited the Jewish cemetery in Worms, and it's incredible. It's somewhat in disrepair, but you can walk around and see the matzevot, the grave markers that talk about incredible scholars and leaders of the community there. So, Jewish cemeteries. There is a tradition in Judaism about being buried in the land of Israel. And the tradition is grounded in a number of Jewish sources that teach that when the Messiah comes, all Jews will be resurrected, starting those buried in the land of Israel. So when the resurrection comes, if you want to be the first one, you do it in Israel. And if you notice that the best place to be buried in Israel is Mount of Olives, which is it's to the east of the old city, because the tradition is that the Messiah is going to come down through that area. And so as the Messiah goes to rebuild the third temple, the resurrection is going to take place. So if you want to be buried in the right spot, buy real estate on Mount of Olives. That wasn't a joke. That's true. Now, for many Jews today, there is a desire to be buried in the land of Israel. And it is extremely expensive, and the best real estate is in Jerusalem, but many Jews end up being buried at Beit Shemesh, which is an area a little farther from Jerusalem, but a place where many Jews get buried. And this entire issue, which might seem crazy, really isn't a crazy tradition at all, because it goes back to the patriarchal story, and it goes back to Abraham. And it goes back to the fact, if you recall, that after Sarah dies, Abraham goes to the Hittites, the people who lived in that area, and he purchases the cave of Machpelah, which is now found in Hebron, which is on the West Bank, and that's one of the reasons why many people think that settling in Hebron is very important, and we don't want to get into Israeli politics at this point. This story reverberates for a long time. Jacob and his family, if you recall, are reunited with Joseph. And at the end of his life, Jacob asserts the importance of burial in the land of Israel. And Jacob insists to his sons Joseph to swear to him not to bury him in Egypt, but to bury him with his ancestors, the cave of Machpelah in Hebron at the family's tomb, and Joseph fulfills the request. We also learn about the same request from Joseph at the end of the book of Genesis. He says to his brothers, I'm about to die. God will surely take notice of you and bring you up from the land to the land that he promised on oath to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob. And so the sons of Israel, the sons of Jacob, the brothers of Joseph, promise. And we are told that when Joseph died, he was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. And this sets up a remarkable statement that's found in this week's Torah portion. It's remarkable, and I want to explain to you why it's remarkable. 430 years after that event, the Israelites are preparing to leave Egypt. And what are they told? What do we know? There's a sentence that it's out of nowhere. It says, and Moses took with him the bones of Joseph, who had exacted an oath from the children of Israel, saying, God will surely take notice of you, then you shall carry up my bones from here with you. So get this. Joseph has them make a promise. That entire generation is gone. 430 years have transpired. Moses is about to leave Egypt. And what is he thinking of? The promise that that was made, that he had to fulfill to take Joseph's bones out of Egypt to the promised land. And in fact, we are told that all during the period of the 40 years of wandering, the Israelites did two things. They carried the Ark of the Covenant, and they carried the bones of Joseph. It's really remarkable. Now, the story has many layers to it. Clearly, this is a story about one generation fulfilling responsibilities of the next generations. Promises were made, and they are kept. I mean, when I talk about Judaism, to me, it's all promise-keeping. I will say to you, I'm Jewish because my grandparents and great-parents made a promise, and I'm going to keep their promise. And it goes on from one generation to the next. Simply, that to me is Judaism. The former generation makes a promise for your generation, and you make promises that the next generation has to fulfill, and on and on and on it goes. Certainly, this is also a story about the connection of the Hebrews to the land of Israel. Because everything in Judaism, at least everything in the Bible, points to land of Israel. Abraham, go to the land. Moses, go to the land. That's Jewish tradition. But probably the most important issue that this whole topic raises is the understanding of Jewish history, in that the life of the Hebrews in Egypt had no future. Nothing was keeping them there. And I believe that this is not just an ancient story, it has modern implications. Because the Hebrews of that time asked questions, and we have to ask, to me, the same questions. How viable is our Judaism outside the land of Israel? I mean, I think about that all the time. Literally. Where is Judaism most viable? And if you care about the survival of the Jewish people, you have to ask that question. And what does it mean to be viable? Now let's ask it simply. Where should we Jews live? I mean, that's a question that Jews have been asking from the very beginning of Jewish history. Where should we live? Is living in Israel the most viable choice, in spite of the war and religious fanaticism that exists there? Is there something defective or incomplete about living in the diaspora, living outside the land of Israel? Does Zionism mean that our existence in the diaspora is improper somehow? Is living in Toronto, I'm picking all good cities. I'm picking all good Jewish cities. A Jewish city is a good place where Jews have lived, and I also like. Okay, is living in Toronto, Kansas City, London, Sydney, New York, Miami, Los Angeles, Paris, Berlin, these are great Jewish communities. Are they insufficiently viable? We hear this message again and again. What do we end the Passover Seder with? Next year in Jerusalem. What do you do when you say the Shema? What do? You take the talit. You take one fringe. You take the second fringe. You take the third fringe. You take the fourth fringe. You go like this, and when you say the Shema, you kiss it. The four corners of the world become one. All Jews are collected from the four corners of the earth to come one. And where do they become one? In the land of Israel. Every prime minister that has ever come, Israeli prime minister has ever come to the United States, has always said, make aliyah. Stop living in diaspora, you belong in Israel. Now, I think this burial in Israel is wonderful. And I believe that in some ways to live as a Jew in Israel is a wonderful place to live, especially when it comes to all kinds of different things such as Hebrew language and geography and Jewish culture and the historical homeland. I understand Jacob and Joseph. They were aliens and they had no choice. Get me out of Egypt. I want to get to the promised land. But here, my American Judaism and my being the rabbi of the New Reform Temple requires me to say this. And I think this is my 13th year in the New Reform Temple, and I don't think I've ever said this, so I decided I should say it. And it doesn't contradict anything that I believe, it's just another dimension of what I believe, because I believe a lot of things at the same time. And if you say to me, Rabbi Landi, you're indecisive or confused, I could say yes, or I could say, I think a lot. As American Jews, this Zionist argument has its limitations and embodies an uncomfortable self-deprecation. We are not like Jacob and Joseph. We are not aliens. We are citizens of the United States, of France, of Canada, England, Germany, Australia, New Zealand, Argentina, and we are comfortable with that. And I love Rabbi Jonathan Sacks' statement where he wrote, Israel does not negate the diaspora because Judaism is a matter of holy lives as well as holy places. That's a good quote. In other words, where you live is less important than what you do. Living in the diaspora is not galut, it is not exile. That just does not fly in our global Jewish community anymore. We live in a diaspora, and we have a vibrant Jewish community, and we're able to live holy lives. And as much as I love Israel, and you know I do, I sometimes shortchange the diaspora. And this isn't right. And I want to set this straight. I'm concerned about anti-Semitism in America and the anti-Zionism that exists in America. And I'm concerned that the Democratic Party is becoming a more vocal critic of Israel. That's another discussion, but it's an important discussion. And I am fearful of the Christian nationalism's bigotry, which has this religious veneer, but which is quite toxic and dangerous. And we do need Israel as a safe haven. And the fate of half the Jewish people who live in Israel is of vital importance to us. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. But Jewish history shows us that Jews have most often thrived in the diaspora. Indeed, that Judaism is a diaspora Judaism, a diaspora religion. The Torah was probably created in Babylonian exile. The rabbinic tradition was created in Babylonia, not in Israel. Jews have done very well without the Jerusalem temple. Anyone who says they want to rebuild the Jerusalem temple and they ask you for money, say you've already given. Rashi was from France and built a school in Germany. Maimonides lived in Spain and then in Egypt. The Vilna Gaon was the greatest Talmudic genius of early modernity. The earliest existing prayer book was drawn up by Rav Amram in Babylonia in 850 CE. The Baal Shem Tov was from the Ukraine. Spinoza was from Amsterdam. The Jews of the Ottoman Empire were the source of great creativity and culture. Jews developed an extraordinary Yiddish literature in Eastern Europe, often quite not religious. Franz Rosenzweig and Franz Kafka were from Germany. American Jewish life has been punctuated I mean, punctuated in modern time with incredible thinkers like Abraham Joshua Heschel, Mordechai Kaplan, Yosef Soloveitchik, David Hartman. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. The greatest Jewish libraries in the world are not in Jerusalem. They're in Cincinnati and New York. We have created great synagogue, schools, library, and philanthropic endeavors in the diaspora. Jewish denominations in America has been extraordinary. Reform, conservative, Orthodox, Reconstructionism, humanistic, Hasidic Judaism, renewal Judaism. They're all important, they're all creative, and none of those variations would have naturally developed in the land of Israel. Jewish feminism has been embraced here where it is repressed in Israel. That's why every month women things are thrown at them at the Western Wall when they want to celebrate the new Hebrew month. It's amazing when Israelis come to America and they find Judaism. It's amazing, and my daughter Leora would often tell me about it, is that Israelis would come to her synagogue in Tel Aviv wanting a religious experience for their children, because they had spent time in the United States and discovered that synagogue Judaism wasn't as bad as they thought it was, because the only contact they had in Israel was with a very restrictive and narrow-minded religious life. My point, we need to celebrate diaspora Judaism. It's all good for the Jews. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's nothing to be spoken negatively of. I understand why Joseph wanted his bones taken from Egypt. He wanted to be with his people, to be part of his family. And it's a beautiful story of Joseph being taken out of Egypt and being carried in the wilderness for 40 years and brought to the promised land. But we should not diminish the diaspora and tell the wrong story. Mordechai Kaplan taught that there are two centers of Jewish life, America and Israel, and we think there needs to be cross-fertilization. We need both the perspective of the Israelis who live in the reality of Jewish peoplehood, and here in America, we are the source of great spiritual creativity and strength. So where should a Jew be buried is not really the question. The question is, where do Jews find their roots? My answer is wherever they create holy communities. It's not about territory, it's about dedication. It's a dedication to Torah, to Jewish living, to loving kindness, to communities that are vibrant and diverse. That is where we are at home. Wherever Jews live, we need to be serious and dedicated. You can be serious and dedicated living in Kansas City, or you can live in a city in Israel. I can give you a list of them where they're living in Israel. There's no sense of Judaism whatsoever. In fact, if you ask them about Judaism, they probably would make fun of it. Wherever Jews live, we can bring the blessing of our heritage. Wherever we Jews live, we need to dedicate ourselves to our people and to the world and to God. Because Isaiah taught us we are a light unto the nations. We Jews are a people with a purpose. So let's spread our light. That is where we are, and that is who we are at our best. Shabbat Shalom.